Steve Hansen. Sir Steve, World Cup winning coach, joins us out of Australia. I'll ask you what you're doing about there. Yes. You're not helping Eddie Jones out, are you, mate? But anyway, massive weekend of footy. Let's focus on that first. Northern versus Southern Hemisphere. Saw 4 series all tied at 1. It just does not get better for a numpty like myself, like you, watching the game, mate.
No, it's pretty exciting, isn't it? And just goes to show you the big improvements that have happened in Northern Hemisphere rugby. And, people probably forgetting that the number 1 and 2 side in the world at the moment are both in the Northern Hemisphere.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that people are forgetting that. I mean, you've been through all this yourself. One All Blacks loss, all of a sudden the knives get sharpened, the knives come out. Steve, I mean, I've worked with you for a long time, and I know that, you get a thick skin and you can cope with criticism and you can cope with honest analysis. It's all the other BS and the clickbait headlines and all the personal stuff that really offends me, and especially when it's directed at a guy like Ian Foster, who I don't think is getting an even break from the media here.
Well, there's probably 2 fractions, really. I think one, Ian knows that the job comes with criticism. He's been in it long enough to understand that, and any All Black coach understands that. And you don't want ever that to change, but it's got to be reasonably informed, I think, rather than emotional. And at the moment, we're getting a bit emotional, I think. There's obviously a large group of people would like Scott Robinson to be the coach, and any opportunity they get quite emotional about what's happening under Fozzie's watch. And then we're not respecting the opposition enough either as punters. I think like Ireland are a very good side, and we keep thinking, oh well, we've never lost to them before in New Zealand. And I go back to when we first started having real competition with them, and their team's changed a lot. They're now picking players from all over the world, and that's strengthened them, and their competitions are very strong. Their club sides are strong, so they're just a reflection of what's happening in rugby at the moment, and everyone's getting better, and the games are getting tighter. And it wasn't that long ago that everyone was bemoaning that rugby was getting boring because the All Blacks were winning too easy.
I remember that. I remember that at the time, and said how bloody ridiculous it was. Look, is this a cyclical thing as well? You look back at your 211 and your 215 squads. We did a comparison the other day, mate. It's no criticism of anyone, but you look at the world-class players we had there, generational players, centurion players, and I don't know how many of our current players would actually get into that team. You have to apply that perspective as well, don't you?
Well, you probably do, but again, it's ironic because when you're playing really, really well, all of a sudden everyone says they're world-class players. But look, just to make an international team and to make the All Blacks, you're a good player. You have to be a great player to get there. And the difference is because of what's happened in 11 and 15 and 19, Southern Hemisphere teams have forced the Northern Hemisphere sides to really improve the game, and they've stepped up. And isn't it wonderful? Like, we've got a genuine competition in every Test match. Like Wales beating South Africa in South Africa, first time ever. So just means they're getting better, and those guys are playing each other often. COVID hasn't allowed us to play as we normally would, and because of travel and restrictions and so forth. And we've got a wee bit to do, but I'm sure that we'll get on top of it, and you'll see a response on Saturday for sure.
Well, I mean, so when you're in charge and you've had Ian alongside you in that, and you have had the hiccups and the bad results in that, it's very rare for an All Black side to play 2 matches in a row where they get out-muscled or outplayed. Is there any special secret to that?
It's called attitude. And I think, like, if I look back at what's happened in the last couple of weeks, you've had a group of players who've had to take ownership of themselves because their coaches have all got COVID, and then the coaches have come back, and the group of players, subconsciously I would suggest, have just relaxed a little bit and think, we can leave it over to them now. And then when you look at how we started the game, you'd say, well, we didn't have the right attitude, and that's all it takes when sides are close. A 5-degree shift one way, and that's a big shift.
World Cup winning
People
coach.
don't understand that.
Steve Hansen,
I think they need to factor those sorts of things into it. And look, you don't ever want New Zealanders to stop expecting and demanding the highest standards they could possibly get from the All Blacks, because that's what makes them great. And there's no one within the All Blacks that I know of in the current group and in past groups that ever want that to change.
It's interesting you say that, because I was told by somebody, I'm not going to drop who the person was, who was actually in that box, who went down to Dunedin last weekend, and this guy said to me, he said he knew when he walked into camp, he said there was just something not quite there, just a little bit off, and he said those are the kind of margins that actually count, because you must, the one thing that World Rugby must be wrapped at the moment is, have you seen a time in all of your time when there's been 6, maybe 7 teams who are all within a level of each other? It hasn't happened ever, has it?
Well, it certainly didn't happen in my time, and it hasn't happened for a long time. So from that point of view, it's good. It's probably the only thing that World Rugby can be happy about.
I want to get onto that. I want to get onto the cards and the rulings and things. So just, if you had a message to fans and everyone else, because you've gone through those ups and downs yourself, where people were calling for Ted's head, they're calling for your head, they're calling for Ian's head and things. So how should we cope, and also how does he cope?
He'll cope easy, because he knows that what's happening inside his own environment, and he'll control that and he'll drive that. He knows that this week is a tough week, but those tough weeks are the ones you enjoy the most. So he'll be fine. We've just got to trust him, and the reason people get a bit jittery and start making outrageous statements because they don't know what's going on, and that's okay, but sometimes don't make it personal. We talk about mental health and how we've got to look after each other. Well, there's not a lot of that goes on when people start pulling their knives out like they are, and the media are probably the worst at it. So you just need to stop bullying people and just have a bit of trust. Report on the facts.
Report on the facts? You're talking about the media. My God, man, what planet are you on?
Yeah, well, that's right. You'd know that better than most.
Let's look at what World Rugby is doing. We had the Chris Pollock on yesterday on the program, or a couple of days ago, sorry, and he was, he's the high performance manager, general manager for New Zealand referees, just trying to get the head around some of these rulings. And he made a really good point. Part of it, mate, is that the communication from World Rugby is just non-existent. I mean, why won't they ever put somebody up to explain what they're trying to do, what decisions? Because it confuses everyone at the moment.
Well, look, the first thing I'd like to say is it's not the referees' fault. The referees are just doing what they're being told to do. And, behind every weird decision in life, there's always an obvious reason for it. Now, if you look into what's happening in World Rugby at the moment, we're getting a lot of red cards. And the big thing is because we've got to be showing that we're doing something about these head concussions. And, there's cases happening now, I believe, that they're trying to cover their backsides a bit by saying, well, look, this is what we're trying to do, but it's not our fault. I think their attitude towards the red card is totally wrong. I think, in my opinion, what they're doing is making everybody feel like the game is dirty, and it's not. Like what happened with Angus and was it Roundtree or Ringtree or the Irish boy that got knocked out? That was a sheer accident. There was no foul play, intentional. You got a big guy that steps inside another player, and Angus hasn't got the ability to shift, and bang, they collide heads. Yet he gets a 3-week suspension because that's ticking a box. That's all it is. And what I'd like to see is, somewhere on the budget line, money being spent on tackle, how to teach players how to tackle properly. Because most of the head injuries are being caused to players making tackles. So that tells me straight away it's not foul play. I don't know any player who'd go out to knock himself out.
No, that's exactly right.
Common sense has got to be observed a wee bit, but as we know, common sense isn't common sense. It's not that common. But however, if we looked at that and we said, right, let's teach our kids to tackle properly. Let's teach them to, in Angus's case, you look at Angus's case and you go, okay, what was the problem there? Well, he didn't anticipate that the ball carrier could step inside his own teammate. So he put himself at risk of, having a collision. Now that's not foul play. That's just that's not understanding the game well enough. So we've got to teach players that right at a young age, and we're not doing that. And if we want to fix this head collision stuff, then that's where we've got to start. You can't just be sending people off because it's not working.
No.
It's not changing anything. All it's doing is ruining the game as a contest. It's frustrating the fans. It's frustrating the players. And, the debacle that happened on the sideline after that with Artie was just ridiculous.
Yeah. Almost as ridiculous as World Rugby whispering that, they got it wrong, but actually not prepared to come out and say it publicly. I just don't get that. What is wrong with them?
Well, that's a la the Lions, though, in 2017.
Yeah.
They don't want to take any ownership of anything. And it's really frustrating to be part of it because, it's our game's going in the wrong direction and it's because it's not getting led the right way.
What about the deliberate knock-ons, mate?
Saying all this, but who cares?
Well, what about the so-called deliberate knock-ons? The TMO's obviously got ESP. That is really frustrating. We've seen them in obviously the Aussie-England games. We've seen them in ours. We saw them with the New Zealand Māori versus Ireland the other night. It just doesn't fit with the pace and reality of the sport.
Yeah, but again, we're making decisions. One decision fits all situations. Like it's a yellow card because you've knocked the ball down. Well, not every incident is the same. Like if you deliberately smack it down, right off you go. However, if you're trying to catch the ball, then what happens if he catches that and scores the other end? They don't bring him back for a yellow card. They give him a try. So because he didn't catch it doesn't mean he wasn't trying to catch it. And that's where common sense has got to come into it. But we don't have any of that. We don't have room for that. And, we give the referees all these new laws or interpretations, and then we say to them, right, you go and do it. But the poor buggers, you can sit 5 or 6 of them in a room and they'll interpret it all differently because it's too easy to do that. Whereas a game like soccer or even rugby league, like last night's game was brilliant. It's a simple game to understand, simple game to referee, and it allows you to get on to have a really great contest. And our game at the moment, it's not simple. We're overcomplicating it. It's hard to watch, hard to play, hard to ref. And until we get, the three parties, I think the referees, the players and the coaches standing up and going to the World Rugby, look, this is not good enough. We need to change it and we need to get it right and we need to simplify it. We're just going to keep going round and round in stupid circles.
You've been saying this a while, I know that. All right, a couple quick things before we go. First and foremost, do you expect the All Blacks to bounce back and win this one?
Yeah, no doubt they'll bounce back. It's going to be a tremendous test, and Ireland have got a great opportunity too, so they'll be up for it. And the All Blacks, whenever you look at history, whenever they've had a poor performance and a loss to go with it, there's nowhere to hide. So they'll definitely bounce back.
And also with that, you're in Australia, obviously helping Eddie Jones, aren't you? Trying to win that series, is that right?
No, but I have seen Eddie and caught up with him. He's a good man, and I had coffee with him yesterday actually. But no, I'm in Aussie. Caught up with Trent Barrett and through my association with him, and then we've had family come and see us as well. So just too cold to come back to New Zealand yet for me.